Welcome back to Bar Down Breakdown, episode 107. I always like to remind people that they've let us do this for that many episodes, which is still wild to me. But we've got a tremendous treat. We've got Steve and Cybele from Electronic Arts with us. I just have a million things to talk about, so I'm just going to cut my little intro short and I'm going to get right into it. So guys, thank you so much for being with us. How are you on this fine Tuesday evening?
We're doing great, and thank you for having us.
Doing great. Nashville says hello.
So does LA.
Excellent. Yeah, so we've got Steve is in Nashville. We've got Cybele is in LA. So we've got different sets of the spectrum here. So like I said, your lineage here is storied. I mean, just a little, some of the research we've done, just kind of to touch on the highlights is going to be kind of difficult to do. But before we get into, the incredible NHL soundtracks and all that kind of stuff, let's just talk a little bit of hockey to get it started. So I guess we'll start with Cybele first. So when did you first, as far as your hockey, your love for hockey or for that is concerned, where did you kind of start getting into hockey? Was it in LA, or I know you had told me before we started working that you grew up in the Northeast, up in Boston. So were you a Bruins fan, even casually or anything like that? And did it translate over to LA?
I was definitely a Bruins fan, probably more casually than I was a Celtics fan back then when I was a kid. I was obsessed with the Celtics.
Sure.
And the Patriots, which I stuck by for, thick and thin, as they say. And then, when it came to actually it was a very short stint in actually playing hockey. So don't get any ideas that I was like this hockey superstar. However, when I learned that my high school had a girls hockey team, I was just like, I had this, how fun is this? I have to learn how to do this. So I did have to learn how to skate,
Sure.
first, and then played for 3 years. And I just love it. The Olympic hockey games are some of my favorite Olympic, sports. And I just think it's a beautiful game. It's a really beautiful game to watch.
I just can't get over that. I just learned after knowing you literally for decades.
Next time I
just learned that you played hockey. I mean, I told these guys before that my skating ability is the equivalent to going to a 4-year-old birthday party. I mean, that's about how good I can skate. I'm the guy that walks around like this. I'm blown away, Cybele.
No, and that's what led me to my, 8 years, and this was in the rollerblade era of the 90s in New York City. And so having learned to skate then, I became the biggest rollerblader in New York because it's essentially, the same skills. And it's so much fun, and I love doing it. And I wish I could still play, but probably not anymore.
Blown away.
Next time I see you, Steve, I'll bring in my high school yearbook and show you.
Just next time you see me, don't all of a sudden say hey and check me into the wall. Please don't do that.
I would never.
And Steve, you grew up in the New York metro area, so you hinted that you were a little bit of a Ranger fan, and then switched over to the Devils for a little bit. So were you in the New York area when the Rangers won the Cup in '94?
I was not. I had already moved to Nashville. So I think growing up, living in the New York metro, tri-state area, the Rangers were your life. It was like, the Knicks, it was the Rangers, and it was whether you went Yankees or Mets or Giants and Jets. That was the debate. And I think then I was very friendly with a guy named Mark Chernoff who had moved from WNEW to WFAN. You guys know because you're from up there.
Oh, yeah.
And I wanted to get Rangers season tickets, and he's like, it'd be much better for me to get tickets to the Devils. So I went, and it was amazing because I got a tour of the stadium at the Meadowlands. It was empty. And the GM at the time brought me around and said, "What seats do you want?" And it literally was that sentence that turned me into a Devils fan. That's how low I was. That's how easy it was to get me at that point. And I remember just, just loving going, to those games there. It was hard to be a Rangers fan in here and a Devils fan out here, but okay, it is what it is. To get great Ranger seats, as season seats, you have to.
Oh yeah,
it's generational. I do have lots of fond memories. I have a really good memory of my ex-wife and my best friend's wife at the time going, and they were so busy talking to each other, and I kept saying, you got, because we were right down in the corner. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, you guys got to keep an eye on the puck. You can't. And literally they were talking to each other, and I watched the puck come out of the ring and go straight between their faces. And I was like, oh my God. But listen, man, I moved to Nashville in 94. When the Preds got here in 99, 2000, around then. Mm-hmm. There's no turning back. I'm sorry. I mean, born and raised Rangers, it's who I am. I'm a New Yorker, but between them and frankly on the NFL side, the Titans, it's pretty rough to hang on to your childhood when you have what you feel is this future of the sport sitting in front of you in a team. I mean, the Preds, as you guys know, this town is on fire, and they've been a part of it. So yeah, so there's my story.
And one of my takeaways from going to a game in Nashville was how they incorporated music into the game day experience.
Yeah.
And I haven't really seen that in other arenas when I visit it. And I love when cities just accept who they are. And, Nashville's country music, and you can hear it throughout the game. They have live country music throughout the whole game. It was just a whole package.
Listen, you're right. Listen, I live in Music City. Right? How can you not acknowledge the city itself, which is literally the foundation of the city is music. And now, as you know, it's country music. It's Jack. If I walked out of my house, like 3 doors down, it's Jack White's there. I mean, this place is rock and roll. It's hip hop. It's pop music. It's everything. But you can't. It has to be a part of the fabric of who you are as a team. I think the Predators got that from day one. I think the Titans are starting to get that. The MLS team, which I work with in town, is totally getting that. I had Jude and the Lion. I had them write the theme for the local, the Nashville SC. Yep. But the Preds got it from day one. And right down to every time there's a goal, you hear, I like it, I love it, I want some more of it, and, whatever. It's entertainment is this city. This isn't a city like LA where it's actors and music. This is all music. And they acknowledge it really well. And I think it makes it really beautiful. I think the only team I've heard has as much of a kick-butt entertainment experience as Vegas, but I haven't been there. I hear it's on fire too. But the many, many Preds games I've gone to, you feel like you're in the Madison Square Garden in the middle of a rock concert. And there's a hockey game going on, right, guys? I mean, you've been there. It's insane.
I really hope Seattle tries to do that too, because Seattle is such an important city for alternative music. Yeah. And I hope that they kind of throw a little nod to it and try to incorporate that in their game day experience too.
Well, some teams progress and they understand the importance of music to their city and to their history. And some teams don't, and that, by the way, that goes between the NBA and the NFL and the NHL and the MLS. I think, LAFC and the MLS, I know we're here to talk about hockey, but entertainment is a part of who they are.
Oh, absolutely.
And there's some teams that don't get that across, but I think those that are smart understand, particularly you're right, in Seattle, they're crazy if they don't do that. We'll see.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see. Exactly.
All Nirvana hockey, man. All Nirvana and Pearl Jam for an hour.
That's right.
Seriously.
Actually, they can split it up. 20 minutes of Nirvana, 20 minutes of Pearl Jam, 20 minutes of Soundgarden. Boom. They don't have to pay me. There's your entertainment.
Sneak in a little Modest Mouse, which might be a cheat. I think they might be they're from Seattle.
No, yeah, they are.
Maybe, or yeah.
Since we're talking Seattle, Tom, I'm beating you to it. One of Tom and my favorite bands of all time is Gatsby's American Dream, which is a Seattle band and was on an NHL soundtrack. So I guess let's just jump right into that, because Tom and I love Gatsby's American Dream, but we always felt like kind of outcasts, and that was like our hidden gem, especially in New York, being across the country. And to see them getting like national recognition on being on an NHL soundtrack, I was always like, how did they even know about them? Because they were small at the time, and they never really blew up. So how did Gatsby's American Dream come on your radar? And were you fans of their music, or was it they submitted it to you? How did that happen?
I'm sure it was submitted. Like, honestly, that's, one thing that we take very, very seriously across all of our soundtracks is, we're not like, we have to have major label bands. We have to have, you know what I mean? Like, it's like independent, unsigned. It really makes no difference. It's about the feeling that you get when you hear the song. And so you're stretching back on my memory as to who actually sent that, but I'm sure, yes, it was sent and pitched. And I love that resonated with you so much.
I think what's really important to remember, guys, is that the soundtracks over the years are filled with hidden gems. It's just relative to who's discovering that hidden gem that's meaningful to them.
That's right.
We collectively, Cybele and I and the rest of our team, we seek this out on a global scale. And that real estate is critically important. It's very valuable, and we recognize it and we honor it. Because if you get one of those slots, one of those coveted slots, because as you know, it's not like there's 3,000 bands. There's been a ton of thinking. I'm not going to use the word research, but gut. Music is a feeling. And it's not Cybele and I sitting there going, oh, I like that song, put it in. It's really, we love this. We think it'll resonate. We think this band, this artist will resonate with every hockey fan out there who plays the game. We think it'll change their life. We think that in years they'll look back, and when they hear it 10 years later, they'll go, oh man, I know that. That was NHL 09 or that was NHL 11. And after doing it together with Cybele for so many years, since NHL 2002, I think, we have years of people now who will say, oh my God, if it wasn't for NHL 2006, if it wasn't for NHL, I'm not discounting the gameplay because the game is phenomenal, but nobody necessarily recalls the improvements in gameplay from 2006, 2011, but they will recall the bands that they discovered.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's culture at that point. It marks that time. Now, when we all grew up in the New York area, right, bands would listen to WNEW or PLJ or FNX in Boston or whatever the case, or WLIR or WBAB on the island, guys, and they would go, oh my God, we're a young band. What's it going to take for us to someday get on that radio station? Those rules are changed. Now somebody plays NHL 21 or Madden or FIFA, and they go, there are some young guys, and they go, what's it going to take for us to ever going to get in that game? Jude and the Lion are the perfect example, and I know you had some of those guys on recently. They literally have told me the reason why they're even in a band, the reason why they even decided to band, because of all the bands they loved and discovered over the years. That was their aspiration, through Avenged Sevenfold and through Good Charlotte and through whatever their particular list is. And I think it's a timestamp in who you are. It defines musically who you are. So the fact that resonates with you is so important to Cybele and I. I don't mean to speak for her, but that is why we do it. We do it because of those moments when somebody tells us, oh my God, that band, how did you know? We listen to a lot of music, and we decide collectively. Cybele drives the NHL soundtrack every year, but we decide collectively what is going to move people and what is going to change their life going forward. And that doesn't mean you're going to love all 30, 40, 20, whatever the magic number of songs. But if a couple of them resonate with you, that's a big win. And that changes the sound of the sport. And that was our goal from day one. I didn't want some guy going, dun, 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 dun. I didn't want that shit. Tell me I could curse. I didn't want that shit in any game. I wanted it to be Avenged Sevenfold back in 2002. I want it to be whatever the case may be. I want that to be the sound of the sport. And now when you go to stadiums or arenas and you hear it, that's the win. And that goes for NHL, that goes for MLS, that goes for NFL. you know, um, soccer stadiums around the world, that's when it changes. You know, here in Nashville, sorry, I know we're here to talk about NHL, but you know what? Derrick Henry, which never happens, fumbles, and one of the song he never does that, but
Yeah.
the song from the soundtrack comes on for the snippet.
Yep.
That's changing the sound of the whole sport.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's something to be said about that specifically, is just, how much, gameplay for the sake of gameplay. I mean, I've probably played every NHL game since 95 or 96 back on like the Super Nintendo, and little changes that were made as the consoles and the generations came through, and now you get these games on PS5 that look damn near as close to realistic as you can get. But I mean, I remember playing like NHL 95 and doing a little wraparound trick, because you can score any goal on any goalie with the wraparound trick. But if you were playing as the Hartford Whalers, the little Easter egg is you put a goal in the back of the net and they play Brass Bonanza, which was granted like the little MIDI version of it, but I mean, like, that was the Hartford Whalers. It was their anthem. It was anthemic for them. So that little thing kind of was a great little kind of charm for me when I was 7 or 8 years old. But as I got older and as I kept playing these games, it came along with me. It was a parallel, because I started to love alternative music, and then I realized that EA had their finger on the pulse with some of this stuff, and realizing that hockey, and we've talked about it ad nauseum on our podcast, hockey is like, it's the alternative sport. It is. It's the fourth sport. If you're talking about the big four, it's always the fourth sport. So the parallels between alternative music are so rich, because alternative music is kind of the cousin just sitting along, next to pop and top 40 and all that kind of stuff. So the meshing was there always. So starting with your first, let's say 2002 is the first one that you guys worked together on, correct?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
I think so, yep.
So for 2002, I mean, that one, that soundtrack itself, it was a pretty harrowing one. So other than, the whole idea of, getting submissions from bands and stuff, like what was like your criteria? Like what kind of like feeling did you want to elicit with these songs? The ones that you chose.
That is a great question. And I have to interject, Steve, because I think you were the most heavy-handed on programming that one, being our very first year.
Probably 2002, 2003.
2003. But I am so impressed to always refresh my memory that was Queens of the Stone Age, No One Knows, and Jimmy Eat World, Sweetness, like, all these bands that were just starting to just bubble under. And I think, that's a huge part of what, Steve and I and our whole department is always looking to do is, we don't have a lot of metrics always or information, about these bands, because we're listening to them before it's released, right? And sticking to that, ethos of really wanting to introduce these new artists. It's you kind of know it when you hear it. It's like, a FIFA song when you hear it, a hockey song when you hear it, a Madden song when you hear it. And I think that has evolved over the years. And I think one of the most interesting things about hockey, because it has consistently stayed a rock soundtrack, right? Regardless of sort of, what.
Even when everybody out there says rock is dead.
Yeah. So we're like, it's rock, it needs to be rock, and it's going to stay rock. But it's like, you can look at sort of our, 20 plus years or whatever on programming the title, and you can almost see the evolution of rock. So it's like, it's the punk rock, and then it was very metal heavy-handed, and then it turns into emo became like the reigning champion. And so it's interesting to kind of see how it all evolves over the years. But nonetheless, like we definitely put our foot down where it needs to be rock.
Listen, your question was just unbelievably good. I think that, it's more than a tone, although it is a tone. It's a feeling. It's the future of the sport. It's not what the sport sounds like to your dad or your grandfather.
Yeah.
It's not the guy or woman, whatever, playing the organ. Dun, dun, dun. It's not that. It's not, even the typical sports anthemic things. It's not Queen. It's not AC/DC. It's not what it is. It's the tone of what hockey is. It's in your face. It's aggressive. It's an intimate sport.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not tennis. You're not like across the you're in people's face. And by the way, you're in people's face even if you're in the stands. You're in people's face. I've been there a lot of times. You're, pun intended, up against the glass. It's what it feels like. So what does music sound like that? And how does that sound in the future? We're trying to imagine what the sport sounds like in 5-10 years, because when you discover something, that's instantly the sound of that sport to you. It's not, you don't want to share that with your parents. Maybe they try to convince you of that when you're 6, but ultimately you're like, screw this. Okay. Yeah. This is what it sounds like. I think it's aggressive. I think it's rebellious. I love what you said about the fourth sport. Sometimes I think, particularly as of late with the death of rock and roll, people might say alternative music is the fourth genre. I don't know, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
We've always lived, pun or no pun intended, outside of the box with NHL. And listen, we've had our challenges along the year. We've had, sometimes people have pushed us to be restrained and pushed us. We want it to sound like, NBC and and Cybele and I have always been the people over here going, any sport where 2 guys or 3 guys or whatever can get in the arena and go at it, you better feel that in your heart. You better feel that. That doesn't mean everything has to have tempo. That doesn't mean everything has to have guitars. It just means it's a feeling. And it's a feeling that you're going to carry going forward. And I'm really proud to, I don't have any lists in front of me or anything, but I'm really, when you just mentioned that Queens of the Stone Age and Jimmy Eat World in 2002, let me tell you something. Unless you were sitting in LA with K-Rock or somewhere else, radio did not play that. That's not what the world sounded like. It sounded like In Sync in 2002, okay? And I wanted and we wanted to be aggressive, okay? And we didn't want to sound like, well, the world is listening to this, so let's follow them. No. I started this because I was making records at record companies, and one radio station or 2 radio station would tell me, well, it really doesn't fit. One guy would shut it down. Well, all of a sudden you got all this real estate, and it wasn't what one radio DJ said was good or not. This is what every gamer on their couch was saying was good or not.
Yeah.
And the fact that Queens of the Stone Age, wow, I'm impressed.
I mean, no, that was really impressive. And like literally, we pulled that soundtrack together so quickly too. But I was just like, damn, Queens of the Stone Age and Jimmy Eat World in the first go round.
Yeah.
But
I love your question and thank you for it. It's I'm so happy you recognize it.
Absolutely. And I mean, like I was able to find a little list, and I'm just perusing it right now. So I mean, that same soundtrack that had Jimmy Eat World and Queens of the Stone Age on it, I mean, it also had, for on the kind of other, more like hard rock side of it. I mean, you guys had Papa Roach and Trapped on there, man, which was like,
very timely.
Getting Papa Roach on a soundtrack, though. I mean, like they were some, huge hitters in the early 2000s. But one that I look at just because of where we are now in music that just kind of wows me. So you had mentioned earlier, Steve did Enter Shikari, right? So yes. 2008, you guys ended up getting Enter Shikari on that soundtrack. And I mean, they have blown up and become a huge band. But in 2008, what was Enter Shikari really, right? They were just, a little fish in a big pond. But also on that soundtrack, you've got Paramore, who are like one of the biggest, if not like the biggest alternative band in the space now. And you also had a very, at that time, baby Manchester Orchestra on that record, who are
very
also,
beginning.
I mean, and you're talking about their newest record that's about to come out in April is like, people are saying it's going to like change the game of alternative music completely.
It's an incredible record. Yeah.
So it's like, it and you look at it like that, like, if you played these games as often as I did, I mean, so I've got a PS4 with NHL 17, right? That I've probably played 4 seasons through already. So it's like, I've heard all the songs on that NHL 17 soundtrack, like over and over again.
Yeah.
So just imagine playing in 2008 and listening to those songs over and over again. And even if they didn't stick with you, right? Even if they kind of departed your memory, all of a sudden you come back and then you see all these ads and billboards for a new Manchester Orchestra record. And you're like, Manchester Orchestra, like what, where did I? And then all of a sudden it comes to you, you're like, Wolves at Night. I heard that song like 100 times on NHL 08. Now all of a sudden you're back in it. And I think that's such an incredible thing about these games is even if you didn't love alternative music, maybe you heard a song often enough where you started bopping your head or you started singing along to the lyrics. And all of a sudden, when you weren't an alternative music fan or you didn't consider yourself one, now all of a sudden you're like, I think I like this band. Let me go check it out. And now you check out that band and then you're like, well, I like this band. So what else is around? And now all of a sudden you've opened yourself up to this complete like stratosphere of music that you may not ever have just because you threw a disc in your PS3, just thinking that, you know, you wanted to, you know, crush some goals with like Sid or like Patrick Kane, or I'm trying to think of 2008, like who was on ice in 2008, you know, Scott Stevens, maybe still, I don't know. Jerome McGinley. There you go. Yeah, for sure. But, you know, you just wanted to like put some pucks in the back of the net and just play around. And now all of a sudden you have a new favorite thing. So I think that is what makes the NHL soundtrack so special. So, you know, for you guys to cultivate that, you know, tremendous amount of appreciation, because I was there. I was in that seat. I was playing 2002, 2003. I was like 15 or 16, and I was still listening to like Savage Garden in my cassette player. And then all of a sudden, like I heard like a Gob song, you know, and I was like,
yes.
I was like, whoa, man, like these guys are great. And, you know, with 2004 had Avenged Sevenfold on it, which was super cool. But for me, the ones that caught me were, you know, the Ataris, Less Than Jake, Autopilot Off. Like
Autopilot Off. I used to love that band.
Oh, so man. Listen, Autopilot Off was one of the first concerts that I ever saw. Like one of the first, like, not sitting down general admission concert that I ever saw on Long Island. Autopilot Off opened that show. It was Autopilot Off. It was Catch 22. It was The Movie Life and Midtown. And
my God, you're so bringing me back.
And I was what? I mean, that was 2001. So I was 14 years old. Wow. I mean, you know, like just wide-eyed, can't believe that this is real. Like, you know, and then Autopilot Off plays and there's a big mosh pit and I'm like, this is awesome. This is incredible.
Oh, that's so good.
And then I get to relive that experience just throwing in, you know, in my PS2. So I mean like that, just for that alone, tremendous.
No, there was some really fun ones with like, you know, those were some of my favorites back in the day with like No Effects.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? And Pennywise, you know, we had this remix of Bro Hymn, which couldn't sound more, you know, arena.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
So yeah,
like Sum 41 or something.
Oh yeah,
there was.
Yes, I feel like we had to have Sum 41 at some point, and like Billy Talent, which is obviously a big Canadian artist. We had them a couple times. You know, I think we always love to represent Canadians. You know what I mean? Clearly, it is just such a huge, massive sport up there. So we definitely make a point to have as many of those as we can. Like Puck is another one of my favorites.
You know what I'd love to do in addition to, I love this conversation, guys, because it just, you know, we do it and then it goes out there.
Yeah.
And we don't know the memories that it creates in people, and it makes me so happy. I bet you that so many of the players today have musical memories of growing up playing hockey, but playing NHL 2002, 2003, 2000, and their Spotify playlist, their personal music they love is also on the same. You know, this is where they probably learn music too.
You know? I wish, and I say I wish because, and I always take it back to this. So Mikey and I were in the Coliseum one day watching an Islander game, and they put up, and this was like probably the Islanders maybe, I don't know, 2010, 2011. I don't know. I can't remember what the team was, but they put up a graphic and it was like, these are some of the Islanders' favorite songs. And I mean, like, woof. and I mean, and I get it. Like, you know, some of the players, you know, in Russia and the Czech Republic and all this stuff, they just listen to this like weird house and trance music. And, but I mean, like, like I don't think there was one like alternative song like on that list. Like I think maybe the closest one was like somebody might have said they liked a Blur song, which I thought was super cool. And it was probably song 2 because like what else,
Probably.
that's the most anthemic Blur song that you could think of. But yeah, so we've had this discussion.
So maybe the Canadian and the American dudes.
Yeah, I mean, you hope so, but
and maybe the Swedes.
The Swedes too. I mean, I would probably venture to say there are a couple of Swedes that are big Refused fans. I mean, like New Noise is
one of the greatest rock songs ever.
I mean, like the fact that there aren't a million, like every NHL franchise is not using New Noise as the song that they skate onto the ice for.
They should.
Blows my mind. But that being said, I'm sure there are a lot of players out there that were, growing up at 9 or 10 years old thinking like, this is what I want to do with my life. And yeah, absolutely. Just
hold on, Tom, I got to cut you off because a memory came to me.
Okay.
So you brought up Sum 41.
Sure.
And Fat Lip was on one of those soundtracks.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for a fact that John Tavares' first concert was a Sum 41 concert because we asked Cone about that. And so it's possible that maybe, John Tavares, when he's not playing hockey, might have been playing a video game for a little bit. And that's why he likes Sum 41. So
I'm taking that as the gospel.
There's no
it's possible with me. That's the truth.
Yeah.
Oh, it's gotta be.
It's gotta be because there's no other way John Tavares would have heard of alternative music because he is very robotic.
Oh yeah, he sure is. And so you've heard our testimonials, obviously, of our experiences, and a lot of our listeners we know have had the same experiences, and a lot of the guests we've had have had a lot of these experiences too, with connecting with the music that you guys have cultivated on these soundtracks. So I kind of want to hear about what music means to you both personally. So, we talked about a lot of this music having just that feeling, that guttural, connection, and just that like kind of heart pounding anthemic kind of grasp on these games, which is fantastic. But for you guys, what music makes you feel that way? So I'll start with you, Steve. As far as like maybe some of the like your favorite music, your favorite bands, some of the stuff that's influenced you, because I know along with cultivating these soundtracks from what I've read about your history, you are a musician. You've played since you're young, since you're 7 or 8, and I know that you've done a lot of music and created a lot of music. So for you, what brought you there? So like, what are some of your favorite artists that have kind of brought you there? Something that has influenced you, some guys that have influenced you along the way?
Music to me isn't something since I'm a little kid, has never been something that you hear. Music to me has been something you feel. That sounds maybe wacky to somebody who's a casual music fan, but I've never heard it through one of my senses. I feel music. And I don't mean that in in just a cliche way. It's like, this is my studio at home. I mean, I've got chairs over here, and I'll still pull out Zeppelin, House of the Holy, and I'll lean back in one of my chairs and put it on the turntable and close my eyes. And some people meditate. I lose myself. I literally, every cell in my whole body just is turned on and floats away. It's always been the way. It's kind of like food to some. Some people taste a burger and some people close their eyes and go, oh my God.
I'm living it.
It's a sensory experience. So, and I really like that. I've never kind of walked away from that and thought it was weird. I've gone towards it. So, when I was a kid, I remember hearing Zeppelin for the first time. I remember hearing, Allman Brothers for the first time. I remember hearing Skinner for the first time. I remember hearing, just anything that was aggressive and emotional. Pop music was fine. I can appreciate it, sure, and if it grooved, it was great. But soul music or blues, oh my God! I mean, it got inside of me. And you know, I lyrics are important, but it's the players themselves, you know, and it's live players to me. It's not necessarily even synthesized players. It's why for EA now, you know, my primary responsibility, I mean, I oversee the department, but because I produce the scores to Battlefield, I produce the scores, you know, to that are in Star Wars, you know, Jedi and stuff like that. 100 people in a room, you know, playing, you know, and I produce all those, and nothing beats working on something for a year and then going to Abbey Road and sitting back in a room with 100 musicians and for a moment closing your eyes. It's insane. So I think to me it was always a matter of rebellion and aggressive, something that separated me from other generations, something I could take on as my own, something was memorable to me. You know, I'm not saying I would win at Name That Tune, but, you know, 3 notes sometimes and I'm gone. If I hear the first couple of notes of Kashmir, you know, Zeppelin's Kashmir, I mean, I don't need to hear the whole, you know, 5 bars. One bar and it's like, whoop, meditating, you know.
Hell yeah.
I always loved, you know, anything that went against the grain. Hard rock, hip hop, when lyrics meant something in hip hop. They were deep and aggressive and talked about people's plight of where they were and where they needed to be and what wasn't right in the world. When I listened to, you know, fast forward, you know, the Hildur Guttendotter scored a Joker last year. You know, Hans Zimmer's Dark Knight. You know, anything like that, whether it was, you know, Black Sabbath or, you know, early when Nirvana came. Listen, I worked with Metallica for years. You know, I was in 1985, I started working with Metallica. And I left my job at Elektra Records in 1990 to go work for Chrysalis Records. The guys from Metallica and their management called me up because I had worked on Ride the Lightning and all this stuff, and they called me and they had just finished the Black Album, and they said, "We want you to listen to this album we just made." So I went to this studio and listened to the album. I quit my job at Chrysalis Records to go back to Elektra Records just because of that album. I didn't even ask what my pay differential was going to be. It's like, so that's what it means to me. So it'd be hard for, listen, I'm the same way with classical music. I'm the same way with, you give me some out of control, messed up, I'm going to go after the guy opera or whatever. I'm in, as long as it emotionally moves me. I don't like bland music that's just made for the sake of making music. I need to hear when Johnny Cash sings, or some great Americana music, Margot Price nowadays, or Chris Stapleton when he sings. I mean, holy crap. If that doesn't get to you, you just are soulless. You know what I mean? So I don't care what genre it is. I love country for the sake of country. I love rock and metal for the sake of it. You know, I love hip hop. If it goes deep, I love it. But it has to say something, and that's just not always with lyrics. The music has to say something. That's my answer. You know,
I love that.
So me now?
No, you're up.
Yeah, no, Cybele, you're up. Yeah,
you're up. Tell them how much you love Justin Timberlake. Go. I'm kidding.
So, I mean, I think in earnest, you know, obviously my taste in music specifically and personally has changed over the years. But to me, it's fun. I can't, like, I'm so thrilled that I ended up being a music supervisor, because I think I kind of was one and learned how to tell a story as a teenager, you know what I mean? And I was the girl that made mixtapes for all of her friends and like a fledgling boyfriends. And I would make my running mixes that were seasonal, and I would like, you know, all update everything. So it's like, I always wanted to tell a story with how I was feeling by the music that I was listening to at that time. And so, you know, I can't really pinpoint a genre specifically, but it's like, for me, I think like Manchester Orchestra is such a great example, because there's certain artists, like Jane's Addiction was one of those back in the 90s too, with the vocal, like the pain and the hurt and all those things, which I think Manchester Orchestra has as well. And so there's definitely a number of bands that kind of have that effect on me. And, you know, I think I also, which has very little to do with hockey, but as a music consumer, you know, it's really interesting to see a lot of these younger Gen Z artists, you know, doing this very sort of pared down, folksy, like just really hard on your sleeve. This is what I'm going through as a person, that can really relate to other people their age. So again, like Steve, I am not, zoned in and stuck on any one genre. And I think, doing our job, we have to take personal taste a little bit out of it. I think we do have that, that gut, like we know when we hear a song, whether it's our favorite genre or not, that we're like, holy shit, this sounds like this is a hit, or at least a band that's we should pursue.
Listen, when I was 14 years old, 14 years old, I used to have, my group of friends. I hung out with girls and guys, and wherever we were, in my house or their house, and we'd listen to albums, and we would love it and talk about it, and some of us would disagree and we would fight. Oh, what are you talking about, man? Are you crazy, man? Talking Heads sucks. And he's like, no, Talking Heads is the shit, or whatever the case may be. And we'd argue over it, and it was all passionate. None of us were right, and none of us were wrong. We were just passionately speaking. Cybele and I have those same conversations to this day. We're still 14 years old. We still are 14 years old.
Totally. No, I just, I definitely missed the day when, I would get a new record, whether it was vinyl or CD. I would be so excited. I'd sit down, shut off my home phone or whatever, open up the lyrics and read all the liner notes and play the record from start to finish. Like I will never forget that feeling. So I think, everything is always evolving, personal taste included. But, again, I do love to be able to tell a story, with the songs.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing. And I think that in alternative music, I say that specifically because a lot of it is going back to writing records that are from start to finish a piece of art.
Yep.
Whereas a lot of pop music, and there used to be, don't get me wrong, Michael Jackson's Thriller. If you're going to try to tell me that that's just a record of singles, I'm going to bop you on the nose, because it's just there has been some brilliant pop music along the way, although, and not to knock it, not that we're knocking anything, but I think today the focus, at least in pop music and top 40, is more on singles, right? It's on, this is a song that I wrote and it could be a great song, but it's just one song. And what you have to get out of that one song is up to you as the music consumer, as the listener. But I think that's what brings me to alternative music, is because you get, a record like, The Million Masks of God, right? That's going to come out. And if you listen to the last Manchester record, it was a story. It was a story, right?
It was a very, very, very dark, but incredible story.
Exactly. Yeah. And Black Mountain to the Surface is that way. But there are so many artists, and a lot of the artists that we've had on our show, that are still striving to create these pieces of art that, maybe you could pick track 4 out of it and be like, okay, I love track 4, and that's cool. There's nothing wrong with it. But from track 1 to track 12, there's an overarching theme. There's a string in there. So I think that's something about alternative music that harkens back to those days in, the late 70s and 80s, with bands like Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, and the Who, and go look into the 80s, the Police, and all these bands that wrote these records. They wrote records. They spent painstaking hours in the studio writing records
and sequencing them too, so
exactly.
So they can tell their story.
And that's why I love, I got out of, I've told this as many times as I could, but I stopped collecting records and then I started collecting records again. And one of the reasons I started collecting records again was because with a vinyl record, you have to listen to it side A to side B to start to finish. You have to, it almost forces you to do it. And finding the love in that is a great thing, because you can now pick your favorite songs and go listen to them on your iPod or on Spotify or wherever you want to listen to them. But if you want to get that full experience, you throw on a record. And that experience, and I think, Steve put it as bluntly as you can, it's transformative, it's important, and it's those things that you could sit around with your friends once you're done with it and be like, yeah, that was great. And, if your other friend's like, well, I don't know, then you start having these really, heated conversations, and then you start wondering if this person should really be your friend. that's where it starts getting wild. But
that's where it gets messy.
Nothing has changed over the years.
No,
and everything has changed at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
You look back and you go back 50, 60 years. I mean, I can't go back to the 20s and 30s, but if you go back, to the 50s, let's say, there, and the 60s for sure, there were two approaches to not just creating, but also releasing music. There was the singles approach. There was AM radio. There was the commercialization. There were amazing songs being created from Motown to Stax to, Memphis, Elvis, etc. And then there were also people, and I'm not saying that those weren't wonderful pieces of cultural musical representation of the time, but there was also people like the Beatles and the Doors and going forward that really took it as an art form.
Yeah.
They were painters, they were sculptors, okay? It just so happened many of them, Beatles is the best example, could single out some of those pieces of art form that still stand the test of time. The only disadvantage they had, or maybe it's not a disadvantage, but technology changed. Technology has always been part of the evolutionary core of music.
Absolutely.
Player pianos turned to 78s, turned to, and then suddenly 45s, and then albums, then CDs, and streaming naturally brings the ability to singling out songs in a much easier way. You don't have to lift your needle up and drop it on track 3 if there was no 45 released. But the truth is, some people approach it, particularly with the advantage of technology in their side today, as making one song at a time. Some people, for the sense of commercialization, I want my song to be sung by somebody on TikTok. Okay, I'm not going to discount them.
Yeah, of course.
But at the same time, some people, you're right, particularly alternative artists, deep hip-hop artists, these are pieces of art. They have something to say. They have something lyrical that's important. It'll stamp time. Musically, it'll stamp time from song 1, side 1, to the last song on side 2, or the whole CD, or all of the 30 or 20 tracks on Spotify. If you take the time, because I have to remind people, even with the singling out of songs, artists painstakingly sequence albums so you can listen to it from the beginning to the middle to the end. And there was a story to tell. And if you allow art into your ears and into your heart, it will change your life. Many people just want to hear it in the background when they're at work, and that's okay. I'm not judging it. But for those of you out there who can understand that people are creating art, which is to be respected, not to be judged, to be, value of this art form is second to none. It changes all of our lives. So you go and you can see a Michelangelo, you can go and see a Rodin, you can go and see an amazing piece of architecture. Try listening to a Zeppelin album from track 1 till the second side. Try listening to a Jay-Z album from the beginning to an end, or Kendrick Lamar. It's art. It's art.
Agree.
Absolutely. Now,
Sorry,
I guess that kind of...
See ya. I'm kidding.
But it kind of goes with my next question, because, since you guys have been doing this so long, you've actually watched the gamer evolution as well, because, Tom and I are now having babies, getting married. We don't get to play video games as much as we would like to. And you have these younger generation kids playing these games who have less of an attention span for music than we do, where they just want something new, quick, on to the next. And when you are creating these new soundtracks for these, video games, do you keep that into account? Do you have to have more songs on these soundtracks because of maybe the lack of attention that they have, and how they want kind of just the next new track?
It's a good question. Listen, I believe the fatigue in music soundtracks and games has, gone up. People fatigue easier and quicker now. A soundtrack could have lasted 4 months last time. Maybe now it lasts to somebody 4 weeks. I don't know. That's up to the individual. People have the ability to speak very loudly on social media. I love this song. I hate this song. Where's the new song? Okay, great. But at the end of the day, no. the answer, in my opinion, I'll let Cybele, is no. If somebody doesn't have if somebody has a lack of patience to where they can take it in, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm appealing to the person where it can sink in. Yep. By the way, video games are an art form too. Let's not discount that. It's a true art form. Using computerization technology, the design is insane. The way it looks today, I mean, sorry, I'm changing the hockey. So I'm watching Ted Lasso on Apple.
Oh my God, it's so good.
It's so good. I had to leave the TV last night to see if they were using footage from FIFA or I couldn't tell the difference, and I believe it's real. But that's how close it's become. So to answer your question, we do it for the sake of entertainment and the art form and the collaboration of the beauty, and I really mean that word, the beautiful collaboration between sport and music that will never go away. They work perfectly together. A beautiful goal in hockey or a beautiful goal in soccer is beautiful. And if you can find the right song to match it to, it only helps seep into your emotional your emotional experience. Take the music out of a movie, even if you have no attention span. Tom Cruise runs across the train trying to find the bad guy. Take the music out, you're bored.
Oh yeah.
Don't forget the fact that the music, whether it's score or a song from Manchester, whatever, don't forget the fact that music will change your entire experience. So no, I don't think we've ever discussed about how do we help people who have no attention span. They need to start getting it. They need to
figure it out. Exactly.
Steve,
I don't know, Cybele, did I answer that poorly?
No, I was going to say that was a really, really good answer. And I think, obviously the idea behind these soundtracks is, like to Steve's point, to really enhance the overall gaming experience. And of course, we're not going to hit 100, 10 out of 10, 20 out of 20 with every person, right? But we are appealing to the gamers that care about music. And I think, it's very few people that really do. I mean, when have you ever talked to somebody who just doesn't like music, doesn't care about music, So I think it's just really about catering to what the sport feels like and to the kids and the players that want to be exposed to something new. And I think that's always one of the early comments on all of our titles, like, I've never heard of these bands, and it's like, leave them in, give them a second, you know what I mean? Yeah. and they'll be your new favorite band. So.
Oh, right. Listen, you can't focus group, you can't do a focus group on music because everybody will tell you they want the music they heard and learned last year.
Yep.
Okay, music. The reason why radio stations existed for so many decades was because music is about rotation. It's not like a film where you see it once and you never see it again, or maybe you see it one more time when it goes to Netflix or HBO. You have to hear it over and over and over again. Matter of fact, I think the number one was crazy. It was like when radio was important, songs would have to be played like 120, 130 times before it even tested familiar, before people even acknowledged that they had heard it before. So you need repetition in music. It sinks into you. It sinks not just here, it sinks deep in here. So repetition is everything, and some people get fatigue from it. Good for you, because that means you're paying attention. And some people, it takes some time. But it's I keep saying this, it's an emotional experience. Let it in. It's okay not to like every song. We can't bat 1,000. We can't. But if you guys pick one song that you remember, which you do here from 2002,
then we won.
We've done our job.
Exactly.
It's hard. I'm going to repeat what Cybele said. How many millions of people play this game?
Yeah.
By the way, if we went out and asked everybody, everybody's answer would be the same. We want to hear Jay-Z or Eminem or Metallica, because people don't know what they don't know yet.
Exactly.
They just don't know it yet. So, turning people on to new music for years, radio stations, it was hard to get a new slot because people always wanted the classics or things that they knew already. How do they get to be classics? It's the ability to turn people on to new music. Cybele and I still are like kids. We can't believe to this day that, I mean, it's kind of like when I used to work with bands and you'd go see them and there were 40 people in a club, and a year later it'd be 4,000 people.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
And
We
you're
love that.
like,
That's what we live for.
yeah, exactly. We do that every day.
Yep. And the enormity of it all is just is pretty wild. So one last thing I kind of want to touch on, just because we sort of tiptoed into it, and it's just a kind of piques my curiosity. So, you know, we've talked a lot about the NHL soundtracks that you guys have cultivated with, you know, with music from, you know, from bands, and that becomes a soundtrack of its own, right? So, but when you look at video game music as a whole, right? So, you know, you had said you had you know, done the scoring for Battlefield and all these great games. So, you know, a quick personal story. You know, I was a gamer from young, from when I was young. I think my parents got me a regular Nintendo when I was like 4 years old, right? So like that's where it started for me, and I couldn't have given a shit about video game music until Nobuo Uematsu and Final Fantasy VII, and that's when I realized that soundtracks make a game, right? So, you know, those types of games, those epic sort of, you know, RPG games and all that kind of stuff, and even, you know, getting into you know, like Diablo and you know, all of those games that just have these great soundtracks with this, you know, kind of ethereal music. But then what I started to realize is like soundtracks, even in 8-bit and 16-bit, I mean, like, are like, they make the games too. Like going back and playing Mega Man as an older person, like those are some of like the best songs that like I've heard. Like just the way that they interweave into one another and what they're able to do with just the constraints of 8-bit music technology. It's just like, who the hell would come up with this kind of stuff? And there's a brilliance in that, because everyone, you know, puts a controller in their hands and all they can think about is gameplay, but you don't realize that the gameplay is nothing without all of the other components coming together, one of the largest of which is a soundtrack. Because I mean, you know, if you're playing an Atari game and all you're getting is beeps and boops, like, then okay, I guess you're really focusing on just, you know, Space Invaders and Pong and stuff. But if you put that in the hands of a kid today, not a chance. Not a chance, because that stimulation that they need from the sound effects, from the soundtracks that they don't realize they need, isn't there. So when you're scoring these things, when you are, you know, putting, you know, into realization this scene that's happening at your fingertips, but the music that's surrounding it, what kind of detail is required in that? Like, what kind of real, you know, like honing in is required when you're doing that?
I love this question. It's listen, it's what kind of detail? The detail is so rich you wouldn't even imagine it. Preaching the choir, the difference between linear composition and nonlinear composition, a movie versus a game, is beyond apples and oranges. When you're scoring a film, as I alluded to before in my silly Tom Cruise comment, you got a person on the screen and you are scoring what they are experiencing. You are trying to, you know, that person in a romantic comedy is doing this, or this scenario just happened. How do you supplement it? Right? In games, the first person is one of millions of people on their couch. It's not on the screen.
Yep.
And everybody has a different experience. That's why it's interactive entertainment. So not only do we have to personalize the emotional experience, because I don't have somebody acting out the emotional experience, it's my emotional experience. So I need to come up with beyond multiple variations of pieces of score. So my experience is going to be different than your experience. It's very freeing, by the way, for a composer to take them away from picture. Oh, I go from point A to point B to point C. Now here's a million scenarios that can happen. I can run from the bad guy and fall on the log. I can run from the bad guy and jump over the log. I can run from the bad guy but decide I want to go back to the bad guy. Who knows? I'm being silly. but each one comes with that own first person's emotional experience, which you are ultimately and completely responsible for.
Yep.
So the music has to be written so the music has stems and they vary as you play, and it has to be seamless and flawless. The goal is to never have anybody hear the same score the same way twice.
Sure.
With limited amount of time and resources and things like that. You can't write for 20 years. You've got a year or two to create a game.
Of course. Yep.
So the amount of richness in story, the amount of richness in storytelling and probability within that storytelling is pretty deep. I would say when we work on a project, we spend months of pre-production as opposed to a film where score is written in post-production.
Okay. Yeah.
Months of pre-production talking about, not even writing, talking about the characters. Who are the characters? What do they represent? We've gone so far as made Spotify playlists for fictional characters so we could see if they had, an iPhone, this is what they would be listening to. What song, even though there's no songs in the game, what song defines that character's personality? And by the way, your idea of dark might be different than my idea of dark. So we also have to find the commonality. We spend so much time, almost a year sometimes, before we even start writing, exploring. Going back to what we said before, this is an art form.
Yeah.
That and the blips and the beeps and all that stuff, to some it's nostalgia, to some it's art, and to some it's meaningless. But at the end of the day, the amount of work, and I don't mean that word in the sense of working, I mean that sense in the sense of time spent. And exploration of possibilities. So when you're sitting at home and you pick up that controller for whatever the case may be, Battlefield or Jedi Fallen Order.
Yep.
It's not random. It's meant to heighten your personal experience so you feel what you're playing. And you can't get it right all the time. I've just like movies. I've gone to movies where it's like, oh my God, this score is completely wrong. Please turn it off.
Yeah.
Sometimes we try to break down the barriers. I like breaking down the barriers personally between sound design and music score. I like sometimes where you can't tell the difference. They bleed into each other. Because if you hear a screech in a horror thing and then you hear the music and it's a part of it, I want it to bother you. And I always want it to feel very personal. It goes back to our licensing songs. I want it to be something that your parents don't get sometimes. I don't want it to be the King and I score. I don't want it to be, but it's I don't mean to pick on the King and I,
okay.
But you know what I mean? It's not meant to it's meant to be emotionally enjoyed by the person who's experiencing it. I think that's really important to note, and we've got to do that a million times over with variations. So, listen, when it comes to films, nothing was more important to score to adults than the score to Star Wars.
Of course.
In the 70s, right?
Yep.
You heard the score to Star Wars. It meant everything to you.
Yep.
You might have loved Zeppelin or the Beatles, but you heard John Williams and you were all in.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I would say there's an entire set of generations now for the last 20 years that feel exactly the same way when it comes to Assassin's Creed, or it comes to, Battlefield, or whatever it is. I could name things, and I'm not being EA-centric here.
Of course.
They're meaningful. And, we never take that for granted. I had an entire deeply challenging conversation about load-in screens this morning with a composer and an audio director, and I thought it was too bland, and I thought it was, why, if you're just because you're in a load-in screen doesn't mean you have to just be sitting here going dum da dum da dum. Bother me, disturb me. I'm about to go into a war. How would I feel if I was going into a war? I would be shaking to death inside. So give me something internal. Give me something intimate. Make me scared to push the button to go to the next level. That's how deep we go.
Love that.
Well said.
I do it every day. I love it. And if you haven't figured this out, we Cybele and I and Rafi on our team, we take it very personally because it's very important to other people. We don't do it selfishly. We do it selflessly because, you know, I don't expect if somebody hates a song in Madden or FIFA or NHL, that's cool. I get it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's not done with us in mind ever.
Very true.
Now, you know, you're keeping in mind the gamer that's playing, but what about the artists who get one of their songs on one of these soundtracks? Like, you know, you've watched it before your eyes. Some of these bands blow up because they were on the soundtrack. Or, you know, for example, you know, Sum 41 was on one of your soundtracks and then goes on and plays one of the NHL Winter Classics, and like those worlds start mixing. And who knows, it could have been that connection on this soundtrack. So like, do you have a sense of pride when you see these artists take their career to the next level because they got the opportunity to be on your soundtrack?
We have a sense of pride and we have a sense of responsibility. And I think that artist first, always with us. Always, always, always artist first. Artists want to be on our soundtracks for a few reasons. Number one, artists play games. It's important real estate for them.
Yep.
They connect with their fans that way. And they also trust us personally. We don't let artists down. We make sure that the position they're in, the real estate they're in, honors who they are. We don't push them against towards any discomfort. We are artist people. We come from A&R, we come from bands, we come from music backgrounds. If an artist doesn't want to do something or an artist feels uncomfortable, we're on the artist side always, and I think all artists agree. Cybele, I didn't mean to take that question away from you.
No, you answered it perfectly. And I think honestly, if you asked, you know, any of us in the music department, you know, what probably our favorite single thing is about this job, it's watching the trajectory go based on, you know, a placement in one of our titles, you know, and some like immediately connect, you know, and you can see it, and it's very, very, very huge sense of pride, and I love it, you know. And bands will always remember, and they'll always come back to us and be like, oh my god, like you guys started the whole trajectory to, you know, fame, whatever that means anymore, from this placement in NHL. So it's really satisfying.
It really is, and I also want to further point out that success is a relative term, right?
Which,
if one band who's in a soundtrack of ours goes on to suddenly play Madison Square Garden, God bless you. But if one band suddenly, you know, has, you know, 500 million streams on Spotify, that's fantastic. If one band suddenly is able to play Denver to 4,000 people where they never even been before, that's success.
Yeah.
If one band from Brazil can suddenly play London, that's success. If one band in Long Island suddenly gets fan mail from Japan, that's success. Success is the ability to be heard.
Absolutely. No, I mean, and you're absolutely right. It's, you know, it is all relative, and it just depends on the artist and what they're looking to try to achieve with their careers. You know, for some, and you've heard it with some artists, you know, you've got like a band like I would have been able to say, you know, sans their last two albums, but a band like At the Drive-In. You know, At the Drive-In was one of those bands that they put out the record that really spoke to their entire existence and relationship of command, and then they just decided that's it. That's all we're going to do. And the same thing with Refused that we were talking about initially. You know, Refused had put out The Shape of Punk to Come, and they were like, well, this is our opus. This is what we are. We don't need to do this anymore. We're going to break up, and we're going to call it a day. Now, of course, both of those bands have gone on to create more music and other bands and stuff. But you know, for that fleeting moment, that was it for them. You know, for them, it wasn't, you know, we want to play Letterman or you know, we want to play, you know, we want to play in the Tokyo Dome, or, you know, for them, it was just, this is what we want to create. We feel that it's hit the people that care about us in a way that it just, what we feel, what we are has come out, and that's all we need to do. And I can respect that, because, you know, some people just want to create music and create art and don't care much about their bank account. Now, you know, if you're creating the art you want to create and your bank account happens to get fat because people love it, hell yeah, right? Why not? But I think that's I think that's just a wonderful thing about the music industry in general, is just that art means so much to different people and it's all fluid. And, you know, success to one person can be something that is not the same, you know, for the other person. So I have one final question for you guys. We've been rolling about an hour and 15. And again, we really appreciate you guys being with us. It's been a blast. So
Cybele has a grin on her face. She's loving this too.
I'm gonna put you guys on the hot seat right now.
Oh God.
So I'm gonna put a controller in Cybele's hand. I'm gonna put a controller in Steve's hand. I'm gonna throw in NHL 21, 3 periods. Who's coming out on top?
Kings.
Go for it. If you want the Kings, go for it. If you want the Bruins, go for it. I mean, you got, you know, pasta.
Wait, so are you asking us to start playing right now?
No. What I'm saying is, if you were to play right now, who's got tops? Who's gonna eke it out? Who's gonna win?
Well, I think Steve is gonna say Nashville.
The Preds, come on. This
and I gotta go with LA. I gotta go to LA. I defected out of the Bruins. I've been on the West Coast for too long, so I'll see.
Okay.
Well, LA's scrappy this year. No, everyone wrote them off, and they're hanging in there.
They're always scrappy, you know. I do love the Kings, so that would be my vote.
But true fans stick through it no matter what.
Oh, you don't have to tell us. We're Islander fans. We've been through misery our whole entire lives.
Dude, I'm sorry. I'm going to change NHL. I brought up a Jets fan. Can you imagine how I feel? Okay, now, I like the Titans, but I've been through more painful. I get it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, it's a tough one. Now, as far as NHL games are concerned, I mean, I know that you guys have been a part of so many of them. Soundtrack withstanding, just in terms of like putting one in and playing, is there a particular favorite NHL game that you guys have?
That's a tough question.
That's hard for me.
It is hard. It's hard. It's like asking what child is your favorite.
Yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, I guess that's kind of right. Yeah.
I narrow it down sometimes to the songs that are in it, you know.
Okay.
That's my front row, so to speak. So
love it. Yeah.
To me, we talked about it earlier, but I'm sorry. All I know is that, you know, I'm probably going to crank me some Enter Shikari tonight.
All right. I love that. Excellent. Yeah. For me, I mean, you know, I've played, like I said, I've played almost every single NHL game from, you know, that EA's done from probably 94 to 20. I don't have 21, but for me, I mean, there's something just so brilliant about each game, and it's just all about memories, right? So like I said, I alluded to it when we started talking, NHL 94 and 95, those games that were on Genesis and Super Nintendo. I loved learning that all you had to do is wrap around the net and you were going to instantly score. And I love that. I did that to way too many friends. It happened to me enough where I broke plenty of Super Nintendo controllers. But then, like, you know, I remember being 11 years old and getting my first PlayStation and actually getting to play my first NHL game in 3D. Right. And I'll never forget, playing as the Islanders, and I think it was either 97 or 98, but actually getting to play in their fisherman jersey, which was just like unbelievable to me. And then, as the games got better and the graphics got better, the soundtracks got better, and they just kept kind of giving my heart more and more, like passion on it. And then, finally it got to the point where, I have a PS4, I have, NHL 20, I play online against people, and like, that's just a whole new dimension too, because it used to be, you'd have to, sit with your buddies on the couch and play right next to each other. But now all of a sudden you're getting schooled by, some kid that's 15 years old somewhere in South Korea or Australia, who's just like putting 12 up against you, and you feel like a complete failure. But I think that's one of the better things about the game, is like, now you get to really test your mettle and see how good you are, because if you beat your friends your whole life, but now all of a sudden you're playing like real serious guys, I mean, it's fantastic. So for all of the work that you guys have done on the games, for creating those soundtracks, for bringing new music and new, new feelings to our ears, and it translating into, us holding the controllers and playing. I speak for Mikey and myself, where, we're tremendously indebted to you guys. So it's really been a blast to get to talk to you about it. But more so than that, just to know how it happened was something that we've been talking about forever. Probably 20 episodes ago, Mikey was like, we got to find out who this EA guy is. We just got to do it. And I mean, it was literally, it was lore. It was lore to us. It was like, who is this guy? Just like putting together these soundtracks. Like, how is it that someone likes Gatsby's American Dream and likes Inkwell and likes Mashlin and likes all of these like crazy bands
Protest
that no one
the
had
Hero.
ever heard of? Yeah. But
Protest the Hero. Oh my God.
Like,
wow.
Like who is this maniac? And sure as shit, we found the two maniacs.
Two maniacs.
There is the man behind the curtain right here.
Your words mean so much. I promise.
Yeah, it really is. So nice.
It's so meaningful to me.
Yeah.
We started, like I said, years ago, 20 years ago, I guess, and there were very few songs, I think, comparatively back then.
Yeah.
But this year, we're going to do a shitload more than ever before.
I'm super excited. I can't wait. I mean, I trust you guys at this point. So
awesome.
I mean, like, I know you're not going to let me down.
That's where the word responsibility came in before with me. Believe me, we know that, and I appreciate that. We're grateful, and we don't take it for granted.
Excellent. Yeah, and that's really, like I said, that's the fantastic thing about this. So, on that note, Mikey, I think we'll let our friends go have a great rest of their night. So again, thank you, Cybele, Steve. Thank you so much for doing this with us. We really appreciate getting some insight onto how these soundtracks came to be. Your love for all things music and all things gaming, and just being with us. So thank you so much. All right.
Thanks for having us, guys. Really enjoyed that
this year, please.
Oh, you betcha. We absolutely will. I'm waiting with bated breath. Absolutely. Guys, thank you so much. You have a great night. Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.